Trustee Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Young.
Here.
Trustee Lazio.
Here.
Trustee Lemunion.
Here.
Trustee Pandolfi.
Here.
Trustee Stepp. Here. Trustee Thewas. Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Trustee Wyckoff.
Here.
We have a forum.
All right, would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
So you can be seated if you like. For the invocation, as I was just pondering this the last few days, I just had the word stirring in my heart, and the word is steadfast. Anybody ever hear that word, steadfast? That's always a word that I have sometimes avoided in my life. And so I want to give a brief definition of steadfast. It's an adjective. If someone is steadfast in something that they are doing, they're convinced that what they are doing is right and they refuse to change it or to give up, mainly not to give up. An example, he remained steadfast in his belief that he had done the right thing. So the synonyms for steadfast would be resolute, firm, fast, fixed, firm in belief, and determination. And the other meaning is loyal. Okay. And so in our journey through life, steadfast is a really great word. And it's part of our character. It's part of who we are. And there's a verse I just wanted to read to go along with it. Proverbs 4:26, it says, consider well and watch carefully the path of your feet, and all your ways will be steadfast and sure. I love that verse because that's kind of one I look at a lot. You know, am I this way? You know, and so as we kind of bring this down into the library world, what we do and how we run and how we make the library great is by all of us being steadfast at what we do, our piece of the pie, our part of the Mid-Continent Public Library, our role, our job. And when I was growing up, my dad owned a Texaco station, just a little sidebar. And he took me to work when I was 5 or 6 years old, taught me how to pump gas. I didn't really like it, but later on in life, I realized he was trying to teach me how to be steadfast and to learn. And my grandpa was a Ford dealer in a little town. I used to go down and hang out in the Ford garage. And one thing my grandpa always told me, and it stuck with me, it says, always do more than what's required of you. You know, because somebody's looking. So if you don't have anything to do, go find something. Put your hand to something and, you know, make it profitable, make it good. And so from a young boy, I didn't realize it at the time, but my grandpa and my dad were teaching me how to be steadfast in what I did. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? And so as we journey through this, our roles here in the library and in this meeting room here, and all the employees, steadfastness, that character trait is really something else. So I just want to pray that for us today, if you don't mind. And so, Lord, we just thank you that that word steadfast means something to you as well. And so, Lord, I just thank you for it. I thank you for all the employees here, all the people in this room, Father, because you created us all for a purpose and plans. And we thank you. And we're so blessed today to be here. In the Lord's name, amen.
Amen.
All righty. So we have the approval of the agenda. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. I second.
We have a second and approval, motion. So call the roll in regards to that.
Trustee Burgo. Yes. Trustee Cook.
Abstain.
Trustee Gray.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Young.
Yes.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Lemunion.
Yes.
Trustee Pandolfi.
Aye.
Trustee Step.
Yes.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Whitehall.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to the approval of the consent agenda. So do we have a motion?
Bruce, I need to change. I put you on consent, so you can put me down as yes.
Okay, so just for the record, on the
Sorry.
approval of the agenda, trustee Cook's vote is yes.
Sorry.
You're fine.
I move that you approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Approval, motion and a second. Do we need to call roll, Teresa, after each one of these or?
Yes, this is actually the last one for you.
Okay.
So it'll be good.
Call roll, please.
Trustee Burgo. Yes. Trustee Cook.
I'll abstain.
Trustee Gray.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Young.
Yay. Aye.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Lemunion.
Aye.
Trustee Pandolfi.
Aye.
Trustee Step. Yes. Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Whitehall.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries.
So the next would be approval of the minutes of January 21st, 2025.
That is all under the consent agenda, so that was one whole vote. The minutes and expenses are all together up there.
Are all together? Okay, so we don't need to do anything else, okay? And item 5.3, do we need to do anything with that?
No.
Expenses, January?
That is also under the consent agenda.
Okay. All right, I don't think there's any visitors' comments.
We did receive 2 pieces of correspondence and it is on board docs under that item.
Okay. All right, so we can read them on the board docs. So we'll, the board committee report, so we'll have the ad hoc headquarters study committee and a report on that.
Thank you. Yeah. So the ad hoc committee met 3 times on this topic, and the last, the day we met about a week and a half ago to pleasure on what the recommendation will be to the full board. And our CEO is going to discuss that in a moment, but basically we are talking about building, I forgot the technical term, build. Ground up, ground up. In other words, a separate parcel of property with a new building constructed on that. We do not know where that is because to my knowledge, we haven't really. I mean, maybe since that vote, I might have talked to somebody, but basically that's, we have not determined where the location is, but it will be a new facility. That's what our recommendation will be to the full board.
All right,
I want to continue on with all the details of that motion, that's fine.
sure. Well, I'll give us a little bit of context. Also on the line with us is Ellis Katz, who's our PMC. He helped us through this process and I'll have him speak a little bit. Oh, we can see you now, Ellis.
Hello.
Hello. But I just want to go back in time a little bit to how we got to this point. So if you all remember back in November of 23, we presented a maintenance study to the board, which was received by them. And in that study, it outlined our maintenance needs, the entire system. But in particular, they looked at headquarters and gave us their best estimate of what it would cost to maintain just the bare bones of this building over the next 10 years. And then after that, the board approved a feasibility study for the construction or renovation of the headquarters building. And in December of '24, we presented that feasibility study in partnership with BNIM. And there was the decision then that we would form an ad hoc committee to do a deeper dive into the options that were presented and to present a recommendation to the full board. So if we could go to the next slide, please. All right. In the sessions that we met, we did a number of things. We looked at the report and the findings there. We discussed the options that were presented, and not to go over it all in its entirety, but in a number of options were presented. Everything from a light renovation of this building to a hard renovation with additions. We looked at historic renovation. We looked at just leasing space, buying a building and renovating it. And of those 6 or 7 scenarios, one of them was to build a new headquarters facility on a piece of land, whether that be here or somewhere else. The group felt that the ground up replacement was the best option, and we'll get to the reasons why in the later slides. So if we could go to the next slide. The rationale we had was we considered, I would say, these 4 categories. The cost of deferred maintenance, our outdated building and how it doesn't work as well in terms of programmatic needs, timing considerations, and the overall financing of the project. Next slide, please. All right, so to start with deferred maintenance, if you look at the report, the total figure for maintaining this building over the next 10 years is around $11 million. But the main cost drivers are HVAC replacement, roof, fire detection and suppression, and plumbing upgrades. Altogether, that's roughly $9 or $10 million. And then there's other miscellaneous upgrades that would be needed just to keep this building operational over the next 10 years. None of this accounts for what I would say the unforeseen major repairs. And much of what we discussed here is planned expenses would be in this neighborhood. But if tomorrow there were to be some great catastrophe, we pay a premium to have that work done and would likely have to relocate staff to do that work. Next slide, please. All right. The reason why we advocate for new construction is that this is a building that was designed in 3 phases over, I don't know, gosh, this is, was it 1960 to 1980? Is that about right? Anyway, yeah, over 20 years or so, but it was designed in essence for the library work of yesterday. And to put that into context, I would say 20 years ago, the size of our technical services staff was much larger, but that group has shrunk over the years to maybe half of what we had 20 years ago. But 20 years ago, we really didn't have much of an IT department. We didn't really have a HR department, a finance department, and or a programming department that was centrally located. So use IT as an example, grown by nearly 200%. The reason for that growth is we provide support services to all 34 locations. We centrally manage the website, the library catalog, and all are much more involved processes than they were 20 years ago. And they all do a great job there. But these new services like the Reading Rocket, Library by Mail, communications, finance, and HR, all require more people. And in essence, we have a building that was made for just the logistical work that now supports much more than what it was originally designed for. So if we could go to the next slide, please. We thought a lot about timing. And what I mean by timing here is that we have an estimated cost of the project as of today in the neighborhood of $44 million. But if we think about what the cost would be 5 years from now, at 5% cost escalation year over year, it would come to the neighborhood of $53 million. So we thought a lot about that. So what would it mean to kick the can down the road and not do the project today and do it 5 years from now? Well, one, the project would be more expensive. We could likely save a few $1,000,000. But if you lump that into the total cost of the project, our expected revenue growth over the next 5 years, we'd still come out at a loss. That the project would be more expensive to the taxpayer, and we have a greater degree of cost certainty today. So, next slide, please. And here we talk about what it would do. If we go with that $44 million estimate, there's a way that we could structure debt that we can manage. And what it would require of us is to pay down our existing debt service over the next 10 years. And on top of that, pay interest only for the first 10 years. Jeremy can talk a little bit more about this, but we've done some calculations, and I don't know, Jeremy, if you have these at your fingertips. But right now, the revenue to debt service ratio is, would you say it's in the 8% range?
Well, that's right.
Yeah, 8 point something. With this proposed financing package, it would take us to 9%. And by most standards, it's an acceptable range of leverage for an organization of our size. Jeremy, if you want to talk a little bit about how you arrived at these numbers and also the next slide that follows.
Sure. We're at a very preliminary stage, so everything is very generalized, but generally speaking, if interest rates were to stay around the range they are now, we anticipate that, an interest-only note on $30 million would cost roughly $1.5 million for the first 10 years each year. If you go back to that slide we're just on, sorry. The blue bar is our current debt. That's the 2018 certificate of participation. As you can see, year over year, that begins to decline as the principal is paid off. And so we're laddering the interest on the new debt on top of that to not make a flat line, because that's not possible, but minimize the impact to operations in the first several years of the project. And then as the blue line continues to decline in 2039, we would then flip over and start paying principal, primarily interest as well, to pay the entire thing off at the end of the term, which would be 2048, 2046.
The next slide demonstrates roughly how we would make up for that $700,000 figure. We identified 3 areas, or actually 4, but 2 with minor cuts or tweaks to the budgets for technology and collections. That would account for a significant portion of that payment. The number 4, the other section, would be reductions in other services that support administrative operations. And then the third one is a little bit more complicated. So what this would involve is a graduated reduction in benefits eligible staff over an extended period of time. And this would be done through attrition, and those positions would shift from full-time, part-time, and that would be sustained savings over the next 20 years. Jennifer, if you have anything to add there.
That covers it. It would be, we don't really have a lot of room. We've done a lot of adjusting of labor hours, particularly as we came back fully online after COVID and the capital plan and having all of our branches online. But we could shift some labor hours and eliminate some benefits costs. We don't want to do a lot of that because then we start seeing added costs and turnover and training and things like that. So it has to be a balance, but we could shift some of those labor hours, spend them on the part-time side and save some benefits cost over time. So
Thank you. All right, the next slide. So here I'm going to turn it over to Ellis to talk a little bit about what it means to authorize the library to engage in the pre-construction process. There's a timeline later on, but you'll see that the pre-construction process would span over 3 years. And we'll show how these expenditures lay out over a 3-year period. But Ellis, could you explain a little bit about what it means to do this work and costs associated with each of the line items?
Sure. And first, I want to emphasize this is before we start construction. So it's design services and associated services before you close on your loans and start construction. I also want to emphasize that all these fees that might be tied to the scope of work, of which the architectural fee is the biggest portion, is not a commitment that you have to spend it if you decide not to go forward at any point in time. This is going to be an iterative process. As you start looking for property and you determine that you just couldn't find anything and you decide you don't wish to go forward, you just pay those consultants for the time they've spent and that's it. But this is just a forecast to get you all the way to closing. So the first part is all land purchase related costs. Obviously, when you ever are looking at a property and you develop a letter of intent on a property that you like, you're going to want to do a phase 1 or perhaps a phase 2 if they find something. Environmental assessment. You want to get a survey done. You'll need appraisal from the appropriate company. And then you need to verify the foundational structures underneath the ground, which requires a geotechnical investigation, doing borings on the site. That all will inform the architect as to what they should do and how to design for the new construction. So the big portion of this total budget is tied to the architectural services, but I want to kind of talk a little bit about how that's broken down. So as you start looking at sites, and let's assume for the time being you maybe have 5 or 6 sites. We're able to negotiate with BNIM that for every site that you get, we want them to test fit it. And that involves looking at the site, the topography, the hydrology, the zoning, the transportation, as well as the shape and configuration of the site, and make sure that the program fits comfortably. You get adequate parking, it lays out nicely. As you start to try to determine which site is better or not. And that only really costs about $5,000 per test fit. Once you then get under a letter of intent, you start doing some of these land related purchase activities. As they get that information, they go into various phases of design. The first phase is what we call schematic design. That's about, I can't remember the exact value, but it's about a little north of 200, maybe $300,000. We take that schematic design and we also engage a pre-con estimating company, which we would recommend would be a contractor, because they're closest to the cost of construction these days, especially in a volatile market like we're in right now with tariffs and everything. At schematic design, they would evaluate that design and give us an estimate. We'll reconcile that estimate with some sort of subcommittee of your organization and go through it and determine if we still can financially afford to do the project. If we determine that it can go forward because we can afford it, we would release them into design development and so on and so forth. And at every phase of the design, we will get an estimate. This design service fee proposes a certain type of project delivery, delivery model, which I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but it puts a contractor somewhat at risk, but it still takes you up to about 50% of construction documents. There are other project delivery models that we can look at that could get us to a guaranteed maximum price by a contractor, which means you can commit then to your funding earlier, and that means we would have spent a little less on design services if we can go with an alternative project delivery model. But for the purposes of this budget, we were trying to be very conservative. So the 492,000 then would cover pre-con estimating, my services, and any expenses associated with those services. We assume there might need to be some outside legal costs for either a bond counsel, if you're going to do bond financing, or any type of title work or anything like related to the purchase of the property. So we assume 50,000 for that. And then in any budget, we carry a contingency just to protect you should things go over. So that's what this whole budget's based on. It is not the whole budget, as we talked about before. It's closer to $44 million. That would be the full budget with all the full design services and other specialty consultants we'd have to bring on board, such as a testing consultant and things like that. I know we did, I don't know if you've got a slide of this, Aaron, but, and Jeremy might talk about this, but we did a cash flow against this budget.
Yeah, can
You
we go
could-
to the next slide?
Okay, so Jeremy can talk about this, I guess, but this is what we had determined would be the cash flow year over year until we get to closing.
Sure. We wanted to break it out by fiscal year. So what we anticipate spending between now and the end of our fiscal year is 125 to 140, based on timing. The majority of this would then be spent in the next fiscal year, presuming, that we keep moving forward at all the various checkpoints. We have that currently estimated at somewhere between 1.8 and $2 million. That's what you'll see in the 2025, 2026 budget, if you all approve this project. And then just a little bit bleed over, pretty much just from a cash perspective, expenses rolling over into July and possibly August of 26, the final 180 to 200,000.
Can we go to the next slide? So here's kind of a more detailed timeline of what pre-construction looks like. And what we've done is we've broken out these key steps along the way where board authorization is needed. And that comes from everything from selection of pre-construction services, letter of intent for a site, approving a GMP, obviously land sale, the financing, all of this would require board action. Now, the committee work would be sandwiched in between, where we'd be giving periodic updates as to, the progress of these various phases. Ellis, I don't know if you have anything else to add here.
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. Some of these overlap one another. If you looked at it as a bar chart. The other thing, obviously, is should you find a site, you might close on your site before you close on your financing. That's up to you. But we put them together for the purposes of this schedule.
Right, thank you. What's the next slide? Well, okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. I would just say that when we think about the need for the space, I think everyone here agrees that the 145 or so staff that work here are support to a larger system of roughly 34 locations. And without this here, you in essence don't have a library system any longer. All of our purchasing is centralized, our HR function and finance is all done from this facility. And we know that we're going to have to make multi-million-dollar investment in the building that doesn't change the aesthetics of the layout or anything in the building just to keep the building operational over the next 10 years. There are inefficiencies as of today, right? The way we have IT and material processing configured as they relate to the shipping department, make it very difficult to do work. Many of you have taken tours and seen that much of the storage and processing of materials is done in hallways. And also, we don't have centralized storage. Currently, we own an additional piece of property in Blue Springs that serves as kind of an overflow storage facility. And our proposal here would call for the centralization of storage and the continuation of the work that we're doing here. So a multi-million-dollar investment in a building, let's just say that's appraised at $5 million. Sale value of that building likely would be $5 million. And no matter what we put into the building, it wouldn't really increase its value. So when I think about the benefit to the taxpayer, obviously the taxpayer wants us to run as efficiently as possible and continue the work that we're doing here. And to invest in a property that we all agree is aging and doesn't serve our needs, I think is doing a disservice to those who contribute to the financial well-being of this organization. And this is why I believe that the committee is recommending the ground up scenario as opposed to a hard renovation. Reason being is there's the greatest degree of cost certainty with a project like that as opposed to relocating everybody here, ripping out the guts of this building and renovating it. So there's a lot of work to do, and all we're asking for today is approval to move forward with the pre-construction process so we can formally look for land to build on and see what type of incentives there are out there to help us make a move. So if we go to the next slide. I don't know, Bob, if you want to take over from this point, but actually, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I think we probably should go for questions now.
Yeah.
I mean, the recommendation obviously from the committee was to move forward with a ground up construction project, so
All right.
I'd say questions would be good too.
We're going to have discussion without a motion. What was that? I said we're going to do discussion without a motion. Oh, not that I care, I'm just asking.
Yes, so could we have a motion to discussion?
Slide.
Oh, the next slide.
Is there one more slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just read this. Motion to approve resolution 25001, approving up a ground up construction scenario for new administrative headquarters and fund pre-construction services and authorizing the library director to do all the necessary action to pursue such. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion. Joyce.
We have a second. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Call the roll, please.
Discussion.
Oh, discussion. All right. Thank you. Hello, you
I have
guys.
lots of questions. I don't know if I'm supposed to go first or not. So
You can go first.
I just made notes here, and I have a lot of other things I'd like to say as well, but your deferred maintenance on this building was 11 million. One question is, what is the maintenance cost on a new facility over the same time period? Because it's not 11 million and I have zero. You're going to have maintenance on a new building. That's one question. I think you mentioned you mentioned environmental issues somewhere along the line. I picked up. I guess I'm wondering what are those with respect to this building?
Oh, well, asbestos, there's ventilation issues in a processing area in the back. Yeah.
But nobody's been impacted. I take it this is just more of things we know. I mean, things are in the wall up and.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So the $44 million, does that include the pre-construction 2.2?
No.
Okay. So it's not 44 million, it's now
Oh, wait.
46 plus.
Well, it's
No, it is built into that number, the 44 million.
oh, excuse me.
How much of that is contingency?
Give me a second.
162.
No.
No,
that's
no,
just
it's
on-
more than that.
44.
See if I still have it open. Bear with me. I need to open it again. Bear with me. While I'm doing that, I can answer a little bit on the maintenance cost question. With a new building, obviously you have a year warranty on any new construction. Plus there'll be warranties on a lot of the product material that might be longer than that. Um, the other thing will say is that at a new building, you're going to be far more energy efficient than the building you're in now. So your utility costs and things like that are going to be much less. We'll have all LED lighting. We'll have things like that that will help defer some of the costs you might be exposed to right now. While it won't eliminate them, it'll help. So on a new building, we had budgeted this is outside of the contingency that the contractor will carry. Because they always carry their own contingency in any kind of agreement we'll work with you on. We had 3.92%, which is based on, excuse me, I'll tell you what the percentage is, which is a 10% contingency, which is very generous for new construction. But we would try to be conservative until we get to a guaranteed price.
3.92% or 3.92 million?
3.92 million, which is 10% of the construction cost.
Just to clarify, that's owner contingency, so that's.
Owner contingency, right.
On our side.
Right. The contractor will also carry their own contingency that they have to cover mistakes or things that they happen to make in the field, which is very common in this industry or any industry where we do new construction.
So if they carry, if you're carrying 4 and 2 million's in here, so I'm down to 38, so they're going to carry almost another 4. So it's almost $8 million of contingency in this contract, correct?
No, I mean,
numbers. Well, no, I'm using your numbers. You said in the 44 owner contingency is 4 million, right?
Right.
So I'm going to take out, you said the 2.2 million's in the 44, so that takes me down to 42. Take 4 off the 42.
You're correct. Sorry, you're correct.
So I have almost $8 million of contingency cost in 44. Correct?
No, that's where I'm getting confused. The
No,
total
I'm saying between the contractor and the owner contingency, you said the contractor is going to carry.
That's right.
I'm assuming 10%, which would be.
Yeah, he won't carry 10%. It won't be that high.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to call, so what is the number?
If I could just help, maybe help, I don't know, maybe not help. The contractor's contingency will just be on their portion.
No, I understand that.
That's right. But it'll be closer to 5% of their hard cost.
So let's call it 6 million in contingency cost.
6 million, how'd you calculate that?
2 million in the contractor and 4 million on the owner. You got 3.92.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know.
I'm just using round numbers here. I'm not trying to get.
What's an example of owner's contingency?
So
Have to ask them.
So an owner contingency is hard and soft costs. So if there is a change in scope to a construction project that you make as the owner, or if there is unforeseen conditions by contract, most contracts. So for example, if we find something under the ground that we didn't expect, because that's your biggest risk on new construction, which is partly why we do a geotechnical report. You are exposed to cover those costs, which is called hard cost contingency for the owner. If there are changes that you make as an owner where you need to pay additional services to a consultant, or we under budget for whatever reason, a cost for like furniture, fixtures, and equipment or something like that, which furniture, fixtures, and equipment would mean office cubicles or furniture or decorative lighting, things like that. We carry a soft cost contingency for any kind of budget overage on an owner cost like that. That's why we carry those contingencies.
And the difference, sorry.
Go ahead.
Say, just to reiterate, this is money that the library controls. And so with a library directed change order, we would be coming back before the board to get your approval to make that change. It's a little bit different than how it was done in the past, where the contingency was all held on the other side. Well, not entirely, I would imagine. But there wasn't a specific designation like this is a
Well,
contingency.
let's talk about the contingency on the done contract under Prop L, because I don't know if people read the contract. I read it after, came back on board. The project each project included a contingency, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Each project included a contingency. If that contingency was not used, it rolled up into the next project. So if you did 20 projects and you had $500,000 in each one, then you had $10 million of contingency costs that the board had approved that management could go spend. That's the way I understand the contract work.
You may be right. However,
I think
I mean, but I will say that we're talking about a contract that is nearly at its end. And I
I'm
think
just trying to distinguish between how things were done and how this one is going to work.
Aaron,
So
if you don't-
now that you raise another question, Ellis, does this include all the furniture?
Yes,
It does, everything.
yes, it concludes your full fit out of the
So
project.
what's the actual cost of the building? If you
We've-
take out the contingencies and all the fluff, what are you going to spend on the building?
We've
Building
estimated,
the land.
again, we don't have any design. We don't have a contractor. We don't have a site. We just estimated that the new building would cost for core and shell, which is what I'm going to call it, is roughly $15 million.
Okay.
Then to
So-
fit, well,
So
yeah,
on top of that, I have the land, correct?
that's correct.
And that's going to be what? What are the big buckets? Can you give me the 42 million in big
3
buckets?
million.
The big buckets are the following. The total hard cost, which I shouldn't say hard cost, it's the total construction cost is about, well, this isn't fair what I'm saying you because there's savings by selling the property in this analysis that was done by BNIM. So you have to factor that in. So the net, how do I tell you this?
Well, okay, I think very simply, okay?
So
You're gonna ignore the building and the sale of the building, okay? That's a back end transaction. So on the front end, we have to finance the entire project cost irrespective of what this thing is worth and what we may get out in residual value, okay? I don't care because that could take 2 years to get it. So you need to finance a number, you need to come up with a number. I guess I'm just asking, what are the big buckets in terms of the spending? And I'm going to go back in history here. This was the problem of Prop L, okay? Because we got a bunch of mishmash on June 20th of 2022 that went through all of this non-cash stuff and said, oh, we're going to sell land and we swap this and we swap that. And, you know, nobody had done accounting and I keep bringing this out, okay? And I'm going to remind some of the people that weren't on the board then, but this was a schedule presented every month to the board. Hey, that said, we're on budget at 84.5 million. And that was, how do I say this? A misrepresentation of the facts, okay? Absolute misrepresentation. Whether other people on the board knew, I don't know, okay? What I know is that in May of 2020, according to the JE Dunn schedule, the board had approved the board was on schedule to spend $92.5 million. So 2 years after the board had approved Prop L spending, they were $8 million over budget. You know when we figured that out? November of 2022, okay? Almost 3 years later. We didn't get an accurate accounting until January of 2023 because I got stonewalled and numbers thrown on the wall and I had to do a sunshine request in May of 2022 to get information, okay? Nobody wanted to put it up there. So what I'm asking is the board needs to understand what we're going to spend irrespective of all this other stuff. And what you're estimating now, what's contingency and what the cash outlay is going to be. Because if you're going to borrow money, they're not going to loan you money based on you're going to get $5 million somewhere down the road. That's not gonna happen. Okay, so I'm just asking for the big buckets to say, what are you going to get to? Okay, how do I get to 44 million? I already know I got 2 million of this pre-construction.
Gordon, right here, I think is what you're looking
What?
for, maybe. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, first this.
That's the report that we presented to the board.
Yeah, we presented that. Okay, well, but, all right, so it's here. Yes. All right.
Jeremy, did you have something you wanted to add?
So I'm not done with my questions. I have more questions.
So a couple of things. The 44 does include the land out, so you have to take that off. If you're looking at, not including the purchase price of selling this land. And so the big buckets that I have, the shell would be about $15.5 million. Internal finishing, so the offices, the warehousing, et cetera, $8.5 million. Furniture. I do this on the fly.
What is 10 million of equity?
The cash we plan to bring to the project.
And that's going to come from where?
Most of that cash is in the investments that are currently in the capital fund that will mature over the next 2 years.
So. What happens to the maintenance plan of the 32 facilities that was put together? Do we have a projection? And we have a debt projection based on how you are going to finance this. Do we have a full financial projection for the operation? Because we're talking about reducing staff. I have a real concern about, I mean, based on what we went through in 2022. I'm sitting here looking at this saying, we're going to cut staff so we can have a brand new building. And I'm not to make this trivial, but it's kind of like, I need a new car. I want a new car because the car I have is 30 years old and it just doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a new car. So I really would like a new car. What are you going to do to get that? Well, I haven't quite figured that out yet. But, I won't go to dinner twice a week like I used to. So basically you're gonna have to make some hard decisions about what you do. So that, if I'm sitting on the outside, say, what happens to all the services you guys promised? Okay. Again, I got taken to the woodshed in 2022 for putting up a perceived $1.3 million budget cut. And for those who were on the board at that time, you'll remember that there was a parade every month of comments and visitors, and the area was full out here. And I was probably the most hated man in 3 counties at the time for doing that, but we survived. Imagine that. So now we need a new building, and I'm not saying this is efficient. And my concern is we just came out of Prop L, which was done on a fast forward motion of 5 years, right in the middle of COVID when costs were spiking. Probably should have been done over 10 years because things change. And I'm sure people like, sliding doors and maybe some of the meeting rooms. But that's stuff that's nice to have. So Jeremy, you said that I'm going to spend $1.5 million on interest. Is that correct? 30 million? Did I hear you correctly?
I don't think I mentioned interest. I don't know.
Well, what's in your schedule here?
Oh, you're talking about
The interest
interest only. Yes.
That's 5%. So what's 700,000?
If you recall that slide, the current debt is going to decline. The difference between the declining slide and what we need to cover that debt is roughly 700,000. So we cut operations out of interest. It's not being covered by a reduction of the current principal.
So do we have a projection? A full projection?
I don't know what you mean by that.
A full financial projection that shows me estimated revenues, basically looks like the P and L and has all components in it. So we're talking here about borrowing, another, well, I'm going to say because you're going to throw 10 million in, you're really talking about spending $40 million. When you apply debt, when you apply an interest factor to that, it's about 1.5. So you're really spending $60 million when you include interest. And you're asking the board to proceed down a path, not you. Okay. Committee is asking the board to proceed down a path without a financial projection. So in my world, where I work on the outside, that would be a hard step. Okay. I'd be asked to go back and put a financial projection together, say, how is this going to work? You're telling me you're going to cut staff. We don't know what construction costs are going to be. We don't know what the growth in 3 county areas is going to be. You have some soft factors like SB 190 to come into play, but I think that's all stuff. Your costs, are subject to inflation. Your revenue is capped every year. Okay? That's just the reality of how it works. Sorry. No, it's all over the place. So I looked at this and I'm not discounting the fact that it's inefficient. I guess I'm sitting here saying, knowing what this organization went through for the last, I guess 6-7 years, are we even done with Prop L? Because you're, as far as I know, you are still fixing Green Hills in the kitchen area. I don't know if that's completed or not. So are we really done with Prop L, or we're still finishing the what I'll call the leftovers?
We had a warranty walk at Green Valley and East Independence. There's kind of a few minor items that need to be completed, but I mean, we're down to.
Okay, so we're at a 7-year sprint. And just as a reminder, the budget for Prop L was 100, again, back to the real costs, okay? I have that here somewhere. That would you. The real cost was $126 million. Okay. When you look at the 113 that was approved by the board and approved by taxpayers in the levy, we spent in the end $132 million. And then normally when you get into that environment, you would take a break and get your balance sheet back in shape. I mean, we're still waiting for the investments to roll over because they got invested what I'll say improperly given what rates were doing at the time. It should have all been kept short term. But I can't fix that at this point. So we're going to take part of that. And I guess my concern is you're going to take part of what is intended to cover the new branch maintenance, and you're going to stick that into headquarters, which means that number goes to 0.
No, correction. All of these scenarios laid out, we're still continuing on with our branch maintenance.
Well, no, I know, but the money isn't you're basically draining the capital fund. Capital fund's going to go to 0. Right now, you have $8 million of surplus, your fund balance on the capital fund, okay?
Right.
You'll have a little bit if you come up with more taxes, which was how things were always, I mean, you look historically, the capital fund was funded by the excess of the general fund, but only at the end of the year. It was never pre-funded. The only pre-funded that occurred, I think, was when Prop L started. So, but in essence, if you're going to take the 10 million out of here, you don't have anything left. You're down to 0. And so now you're back to taxes have to cover that maintenance cost. if you would just take a breather and build this thing up, and if you can get 4, and, you know, your short-term rates are currently 4, I don't expect them to go down, okay? Because inflation's is not going down. So if you build this up to, you know, 15 or 10 or at least $15 million, you're gonna have, you know, $700,000, which is going to cover a lot of that maintenance. So you know, if you don't do that, then you're down to 0 and it comes out of your tax revenue. And I guess I'm sitting here thinking, do we really need to do this right now? Because I would really like to see the balance sheet get cleaned up before you head down this path. And, you know, it doesn't mean you can't go out and look for land and say, you know, here's some options and bring it back to the board. The way I read this is the board approves this, push it down the path to a new building, and you're going to start construction in 26. Whatever it was.
Well, I don't think that's an accurate reading. As we said, there's steps along the way.
Yeah, but you're going to move in that direction. Come on. What would stop you from entering into contract? If you find property and you say this is what we want, and you get a schematic design, what's going to stop you from going forward?
Cost of land, GMP isn't competitive, prices, like the sky falls out and inflation goes up. And it's outside of our
Let's say it
budget.
doesn't. Let's say it comes into 40, I mean, even if it's $44 million, you have 0 left over in the capital.
Is that, I'm confused about 0 in the capital fund.
Well, I'm just going off this 10 million of equity.
Yeah, no, he's right. But what you all approved in this year's budget was 1.5 million to start funding that new maintenance plan. And we intend to continue that.
So it's going to come out of tax revenues.
Yes, everything we do basically comes out of tax
So,
revenue.
so I'm back to all your maintenance costs has to come out of tax revenues because you have nothing in reserve. And on top of that, now you have a new fixed cost, and debt is a fixed cost. Okay. You know, I mean, theoretically, you can pay, you could theoretically, so people understand how COPs work. And for the record, I hate them because I think it is an improper use of the debt service structure. You can say, we're just going to skip a debt payment this year, okay, by not budgeting it. And your debt rating would go in the tank, but that's what you can do. And now you throw on, you know, you're going to throw in this fixed cost, whatever that number is. I don't like these. I don't like front and back, so I can never keep it straight. So now I'm going to have, you know, for a few years, almost $7 million of cost. It's going to drop all the way through 238, and then I have a level cost of 4.3 million somewhere out there. But I'm doing all this based on a debt schedule. I don't have a financial plan, and I don't think it's appropriate for the board to even consider this thing if it doesn't have a financial plan. There is no business that would do this, and no disrespect intended, but you know, you have to have a plan for all your other costs and see what happens and do a little modeling and what if. And say, you know, what if things do go wrong? What if things, you know, what if my healthcare spikes 15% a year? What am I going to do? What if I do have 10% inflation and to keep my staff from walking out the door, I have to get 10% raises, but my revenue is only going to go up 3 to 5%. What's going to happen?
Respectfully, we have that every year.
What's that?
As you indicated, our revenue
But
is capped by the Hancock Amendment.
No, I know that, but you're asking me to take on a new fixed cost.
Right. But
Because right now, I know that if the blue line is if you're saying the blue vertical bar is my current debt structure, principal and interest, correct?
Yeah.
So I get down to it gets down to 5 million in 3 years. 3 or 4 years. I mean, the other option, that I don't see out here is to refinance the entire package. And again, I don't know if that's an option or not, but interest only for what looks like 12 years, I just don't like that. I just don't like that from a finance side. Or in the finance business, there are what they call the walking dead or zombie companies that they can cover the interest, but they can't cover the principal. And so they're reliant on the debt in order to operate, but they don't generate enough revenue to cover and pay off the balance sheet. They're always leveraged to the hilt. And I just don't think it's appropriate for the library to be in that situation. And I'm going to skip all the other stuff in 22, but that's the bulk of it. I do not support this. I think you need to take a breather and put this on the shelf for a year. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, share my opinion, probably not quite as passionate as Gordon, but yeah, I think this is a very hard decision. I think it's a very serious decision. There's a lot of things we vote on that, really are not as important. I just think this is a very important decision. And I've been giving it a lot of thought, and we totally appreciate the work Aaron has done on this. It's just been amazing. And I too would love a new building. I think we have these ranches that are probably never been in such good shape. And then our headquarters is certainly lacking, in certain areas. And I guess it just comes down to it. I do feel I just have to go with my gut feeling is that it is just too expensive. I think it would could put us in a very risky and a bad situation that we'd have to go back to the taxpayers again to bail us out if we move forward right now with this. But especially, like going through this tour of the facilities today, I think something does have to be done. The IT people are just like in bunk beds on top of each other. So that doesn't mean that can't be solved without $50 million, in my opinion. Just today, if I would have seen this sooner, I would have certainly mentioned it at our meetings, but seeing how we have this storage facility, this warehouse here, and then the maintenance here, that if we can move those someplace else and put accommodate, with the big spaces we have, move the IT people into there, move some other things there. I guess I just feel that we haven't spent enough time on really talking over these other options. That most of our time in the meeting has been like, yeah, we're just gonna move forward and we're gonna do it either this way or this way. And you want a blue car or a red one? And I feel like I would love to do it. I wish we were in a little different position to move forward right now. And I feel terrible because Aaron has just been the most wonderful CEO and has brought us all together, both on the board, and I think all of the staff feel the same way. So it is, it's difficult for me to even say a position. So Aaron, I hope you understand. All due respect, this is just what I feel like. All the board members, we're in this position to really think through these things and do what we think is the best for the library and, for all of our counties. So in my humble opinion, I think we should wait and maybe just let staff and even the board members, think some more about it, how we can, because we have to do something. for the people here. And we're talking about such a large sum of money. I would personally like to see that money somehow, go towards more for the employees and less, and like, okay, maybe we won't have a brand new building, but maybe there's something we can do to where our employees feel, just really appreciated, and they have the space that they need, and we have things that are needed, that those can be fixed up. I think there's just a different answer than 50, $60 million that we can do with a few $1,000,000. So anyway, that's my opinion, and I encourage my fellow board members to not go forward.
So,
Susan,
Yuma, you just made a statement that this project will cause us to have to go back to taxpayers. I like to ask committee members and the consultants on the phone, what is the likelihood of that? Because I'm sure if this proposal meant that we have to go back to taxpayers, that would have been communicated during this presentation.
Yeah, and Susan, I just said it perhaps would.
Well, we
May
can't.
not.
we can't
respectfully,
make
Susan,
decisions
that's
on
why you
perhaps.
do a projection.
Yeah,
I know, but we can't make decisions on
Right.
perhaps, so I wanna know what's the likelihood.
that's a good question.
Well, we,
Very good.
again, we don't have a financial projection that gives us a range of what might happen, okay? So, I mean, it's easy to take pieces of this and raise questions, but if you had a projection, you could look at, you would know the risk areas, and you would have maybe, at least two or maybe probably three variations with your cost estimates, and say, okay, what if, what happens if insurance goes up 10% a year? And again, the message that we're going to build this new headquarters, and again, as I said, it's kind of like I have an old car and it needs some work and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but the message to the taxpayer is we're going to cut staff. But that's what
I didn't hear that.
that's what I heard. That's what I heard. Yes, you did. You said you're going to cut full-time staff.
Excuse me, I have to interject here. That's a long-term thing. These cuts that we could make to account for $700,000 have to do with delayed upgrades to technology, reducing collections budgets in areas where demand is waning. Salaries and benefits was a long-term solution. We didn't even specify a number, but that's to where over time, some of these adjustments could be made. The staff that are listening, that is not what we're suggesting here.
It's not cutting of staff, it's a taking of a labor hour, so like if you have a 40-hour week employee that's getting, retirement, health insurance, the things that we provide for them, that if a full-time employee were to leave, that we would replace those labor hours instead with a not benefits eligible employee. So the intent is not to impact service by cutting staff, but to shift away some of the benefits cost over time by reducing the number of full-time staff. And again, in a way, we have to do that in a very thoughtful way, because we don't want to increase, other costs that are often hidden, like for turnover and training and those types of things.
Right, and you also send a message that and again, I'm spitballing here, but that also could make it more difficult to hire people, because you can't get a full-time who wants the benefits or needs the benefits. And, the male, female, but, you look at the people with families, sometimes the women work to get the benefits or the insurance benefits. Somebody has to carry that. And I just think if you're going to if you say we're only going to hire part-time, then,
Gordon, I didn't finish my question.
oh,
You
sorry.
heard a lot of yours. Touche. My other question is, why do we even have an ad hoc committee to study this? do we respect the people enough on it to do some preliminary workup on this? Or do we want to just pull it apart and say all the work they did is not even valid? Well, of course, when you're doing any construction project, there's a lot of unknowns, and we know that. I've built houses, I've been involved with other construction projects. But my experience is the final number doesn't stray too far away from what the general projections have been. Now, there are exceptions, but some of those factors are controllable. I'm just saying, if we task these people to do this, it's good to have questions, but let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, talking about shoulds coulds and maybes and what could happen. I like to see hard facts when we're talking about making decisions.
Yes.
On the deferred maintenance sheet, so I've got the investment numbers. So we're talking about $11 million, in excess of $11 million per year for maintenance of this facility here. Sorry. 11 million. Okay. That's theoretically, if we don't have those expenditures, so you have to have $10 million that what are going to have to be spent on a building, whether it's here. No, it's even 5 years. Talking about half of it, 5 million, but it doesn't matter. The point of it is that we have in excess of $1 million per year that we're pretty much accepted the fact that we're going to have to put into this building one way or another. Or we could help finance a new building on new ground somewhere, and we don't have that maintenance program. Obviously, we should be deferring every year. I mean, we should make sure we have legitimate maintenance every year. But I just wanted to go, this is the large, on that sheet of what, 29, I forgot how many facilities are on there. 24. By far, the maintenance is on this building. And if I had the choice between maintaining this building and putting in the construction of the new building, I'm going to do the new building because it's less. How old is this building, by the way? I keep hearing every time I have a meeting, no one knows for sure. How old is this building that we're in?
A great question. Just said 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah, I think it's 58 and 65.
So it's 40 years old.
It's closer to 60.
Depending on what side.
And let me tell you that there are foundation programs at 60 years old.
65.
I assume we have a foundation on this building? Under this building somewhere?
Well,
I think it was 1965.
again, Bob, I get your number, but it's $1 million a year. So,
Yeah.
even if you milk this thing for 2 or 3 years, so you spend $3 million. So what? It avoids me putting $40 million on the balance sheet in debt. Okay. And the debt service that goes with it. So I'm going to spend, and again, I'm not saying don't do it ever. I'm saying get your balance sheet straightened out and get your current capital maintenance reserve set and do this separately. Okay. Don't drain the bank or don't drain the piggy bank or the savings account to do this. And then you're having to suck out of operations. Get your reserve set so that the interest on your reserve funds the costs that are in the other plan, and this can be handled separately. And that may mean, again, maybe it's 2 years, whatever, but I really am concerned about the message of 10 years of interest only, and then we got this debt hanging out there. And 10 years is a long time to have a principal balance where you've made no payments. And just, I don't like that.
Well, and I appreciate.
So I don't think that's prudent.
So,
In my
I didn't have text, I didn't know we were going to get into all this. Actually, I built construction where you need to go underneath and determine what the soil looks like after the grass on top. So you need to watch what you're building on. Regardless, what's the average growth rate on revenues in the last 5 years? Do you have any idea?
I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, sorry. Just 1 second.
Well, I'll give you a history I do know. When Prop L was approved, the revenues were 42 million, right? And the levy increase was 25%. So that said you needed another 8 million, right? So it puts you at $50 million.
I don't think we voted on a 25% increase in 2016.
Oh, absolutely we did. It was 32, went to 40. Levy was 32 cents and went to 40.
No, I think it was.
Never.
No.
No,
came out to 40.
well, if the statutory levy is 40, it came down because of Hancock. So
That was calculated.
I get that, but it was Hancock driven. So the statutory levy, if things went reversed, you'd end up back at 40 cents somewhere down the road. But it was set, if you just do the raw calculations of revenue, there are 40 to 40, whatever, 42 million. And you went to $50 million. We're now at 70, right, Jeremy?
70 was last year, yeah.
Yeah, we're at 70.
So again, I'm going to ask, what's the average growth rate over the last 5 years?
I don't have it in my head, but it's easy to get. Let's put it that way.
I think Jeremy's.
Jeremy, are your wheels turning?
Yeah, so the 3 years from 2019 through 2022, revenue was essentially flat. It was 63.3 million 2 years in a row, and then 63.28, so it went slightly down. In 22, it grew 2.2 million or 4%. And last year it grew 5.2 million or 8%. So the total.
You'd have to look at it two ways. Remember, we did a voluntary reduction for 2 years.
Sure.
So you can look at that, which is the actual revenue, or you can go back and do a calculation saying, what if? But the numbers, you still end up with a 20 million spread over the last,
Well, the next question I'm going to get to.
So
is
call it on average $1.5 million a year.
And that's coming from what counties? And I do not want to get it.
That's all of them. That's all.
Oh, well, I want to know where the
You can't
majority of
get
that's
county
coming.
by
I want to know where the majority of this is coming.
It's all, well, historically, half the revenue comes out of Jackson. That's also.
Well, I think we agree with that. And certainly we have controversy over reassessment in Jackson County. Probably will have it again this year.
No idea.
Well, 2 years from now. I'm just concerned about the structure of this building and the age of it, and deferred maintenance can't be deferred forever, and it's going to cost something to make some major changes here. I don't know. I have no idea where the CEO is looking at land. I don't know who's come knocking on his door, so I have no idea what land prices are and locations and so forth. I just think it's to wait. Now, I don't think I think commercial construction costs will do everything but go down. So they're going to be going up. And the question is, to how much percentage does that exceed? And so forth. And I have that figure. So I just think that at this point in time that there is a need for this structure to be replaced. Yes, it'll be sold for something. I don't know what we get out of it. I have no idea. I don't really know what the Blue Springs property is going to receive, but I just think there's a lot of costs that's going to be annualized every year here. I don't know if it's an issue.
Yeah, right there.
Agreed.
Got it right there. Yes.
I just, from my standpoint, we did invest in our front facing properties, are the buildings that our customers use every day, the services that our customers use every day. But let us not forget, this building and the people in this building are the resources and foundations for all of that. And if we let this hobble along for however many years, the buildings that the people will feel the difference. They'll feel the effect of that. And I think there's a cost to that. There's that people need services, probably now more than ever. Our door counts are going up, our services are being used, but the people in this building are key and core of that. And I think that you can't, I think of it like I mentioned this before, like a wagon wheel. You can have a beautiful rim around it with all the spokes that looks and operates well, but if the core of that wagon wheel hobbles along, isn't efficient or whatever, it's going to affect the whole structure. And I think when we look forward to the future, I think that being able to have an efficient running building, both human resources and more energy efficient, all those things will have caused this organization to run better. And I think our customers deserve that. And I think that the demand will necessitate that.
Thank you, Joyce. Anyone else, Marcy?
I'd just like to remind us that the resolution authorizes the director to pursue a ground up scenario. But we heard it explained tonight, presentation. If things don't play out financially and we can't make this fly, we have the opportunity to step back. And whatever we gain through the ground that we make in the beginning of that process, we can hold that until a time when it seems more appropriate. If, let's say we don't have any opportunity for some land that's reasonable, and can't proceed, and we hit that point. We're not voting tonight to purchase land, to build a building, to commit to the total amount. We're looking at projections based on a best guess scenario, well thought out, well reasoned, and thank the committee for their work in looking at all of this in addition to staff. But we're authorizing them to move forward and look at what that future could be. And without us saying, you can look at the future, we just sit here and twiddle our thumbs until we decide to put $11 million into this building. And I don't think that's a reasonable approach. We don't know that we might not have a developer or a city or someone come forward with a heck of a deal that benefits both the current owner and us as prospective owners to do a joint development that maybe drops the cost of land down to something far below what we'd expect. We just don't know that. And this is just asking us to allow Aaron to move forward and pursue what might be out there. We don't know. We don't allow him to take a look. So I'm satisfied that where we're at right now, we're safe to proceed financial as we begin to answer all of these questions. And I'm not interested in looking at what happened years ago with other projects and what history is. Let's look at what we have before us. Let's make sure this is the best deal for our communities. And at least be forward thinking and not just twiddling our thumbs. I'm in full favor of proceeding with the resolution.
Well said.
I think Marcy makes a good point that it is that it's not for the full thing, that it is just to let Aaron proceed. It does have a financial commitment to it, obviously, you know. But I just want to interject that it's not an all or nothing. It's not, I think all of us agree that we want the best for the employees. We need to really do something, you know, for the employees at the headquarters. And so even if we don't go through with the new building, something can be done, you know, something can be done for that. So we have different opinions as to what that is. Some of us don't want to do the big 50 million thing. And, you know, that's what we'll have to vote on.
Yes.
As I understood, Jeremy, what you're approving tonight is for them to spend $2.2 million. This $2 million is going into next year's budget. So it's not.
It's not.
Is it possible I can interject here?
You can, but let me finish.
Okay.
That's what he said. Then if you approve this, that's what's going to go into next year's budget, and the board will vote on that in June. And if the board approves that, management has authority to spend it.
There's three things I wanted to just bring up, if it's okay with the board.
Yes.
One, if you go back to Jeremy's cash flow and how I described how we're going to spend that $2 million, it's iterative. You hired us to give you a fully and transparent budget analysis. So as we start developing these potential sites and potential test fits, we will also update development budgets so that they report back to this board or a subcommittee of this board as to where we stand every single step of the way. It'll be fully transparent. The cash flow is such that if there is any point in time this board decides to put it on hold or to stop it, you can. And so I think you should look at the cash flow, not the total nut in terms of what you're going to spend. Yes, that's a budget for how much it could be spent. But like I said before, if we change even the project delivery model, we could probably save a little bit more depending on when we want to close get the guaranteed maximum price. The third thing I wanted to mention was, and I think it's important to note, is that the program that was presented to you in the past shows that your current building is 10,000 square feet short of what it needs to be. And so that's why we did a number of scenarios and ended up coming back with a conclusion of doing ground up. Because if you had to build a 10,000 square foot addition, in addition to fully renovating your building, the cost was equal or more to what would have cost to build a new building. Because you have to relocate all of your staff to a temporary location in order to renovate this building. The building cannot be done where people are in the building at the same time. The mechanical systems have to be fully upgraded. You have to re-roof the building. There's daylighting issues with this building. If you've walked around it, there's horrible daylight situations in this building that your employees have to deal with on a daily basis. So I just wanted to make sure it was clear, unless you wish to change the program, we're 10,000 square foot short in the current building.
Thank you. Just, can I say, but the board doesn't control or have, unless I'm wrong, have the ability to step in and say, Aaron, don't spend that money. Once we approve the budget, it is up to Aaron to tell the board when he thinks we should stop. We're not micromanaging that. And
I think we also have to, those of us that were here have a lot of mixed feelings about what happened in the past. But we have Aaron now, and we have a different person. So I don't think to make the assumption that he's not going to be honest and he's here because we have confidence in his ability. I think we have to make the assumption.
I'm just clarifying that the board is not going to make the decision on a month-to-month basis. Okay? And again, just to reiterate my position, I'm asking for a financial projection that tells us how this is going to roll out, not just a debt schedule. Okay? A debt schedule is one line item on a projection, okay? Or two, it's the capital and the interest reserve. To address the capital fund reserve that we need for the facilities we just spent $132 million on, and which means maybe we push this back a year and in worst case, 2 years. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, let's get a better analysis and get our balance sheet in order.
And I also think it's clear, the more we push it back, the more it's gonna cost. So,
that could be not.
it will be.
Well, technology changes and needs, I mean, we should be building a headquarters for 2040, not for next year. And the facilities we have, because I don't know what's going to happen with, you take the 20-year-old 25-year-old generation, how are they going to use a library in 20 years? That's what we should be building.
That's our intent.
Yeah, that really is.
Anyway, I beat the table enough.
We call for a vote.
We should call the vote.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we're gonna call the vote. So
Are we voting to call the vote or are we just voting for the?
Well, we first need to vote.
yeah, to actually proceed.
I'm moving that we cross vote.
I'll second.
Just a second, please.
I was just gonna say, if there's no further discussion, then there's no reason why let's just vote.
If there's no further discussion, then we're gonna call for a vote. So Teresa? Call the roll.
Sure. Trustee Burgo.
Yes.
Trustee Cook.
No.
Trustee Gregg.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Young.
No.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Lemunion.
No.
Trustee Pandolfi.
No.
Trustee Step. Aye. Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Wykoff.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Motion here.
I think for records, would you announce the vote, please? Number of ayes, number of noes.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
Okay. Seven ayes, 4 noes. 7 ayes.
All right.
Somebody.
Ron's not here.
Oh.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm like,
Okay, I think we go to that. We have one more agenda item or two.
Yes, well, we had several committee reports. I believe. So, Lori, do you have a report for the technology committee?
We do. We met yesterday and we have some exciting news. Brian is not feeling well. So Brian, I don't know if you want to delay until next time.
He's not here.
Brian's not in today.
Yeah.
Then let's just delay until next time so that we don't have to
Okay.
pull that. But we do have some exciting things happen in the technology world, and Brian did do a great presentation yesterday. If you have time to watch the recording, it will give you an update. Thank you.
So, thank you, Lori. I appreciate it. So Bob, building committee,
No,
anything?
thank you. We have not had a building committee.
Gordon,
Same.
finance and audit,
No
okay.
meetings.
Marcy, fundraising,
Just no real report except to say that we're in the process of the Library Giving Day campaign, and all of you should have received your letters from
Okay.
Diana regarding that, so just.
thank you. Joycelyn,
The personnel committee does not met.
and Jeremy, next item, financial reports.
Right, thank you. Go ahead and flip to the next page. We'll start with the property taxes for the, excuse me, the current fiscal year. We've collected $62.5 million compared to last year, which, sorry. We collected 67.7 million in the current fiscal year compared to 62.5 million last year. That $5 million is due to the levy being restored in the current year. Move on to the next slide, looking at our cash projections. Good news is our cash is improving compared to our initial projections. So that's always a good thing. The purple line, I think it looks purple on that screen. The purple line is the current fiscal year. And for the first time, we're over where we were year to date with cash compared to last year, which is a good thing. As I'm sure most people know, the library receives the majority of its revenue in December and January. So from here to the end of the fiscal year, it will be more cash spending than cash receiving. So you see our projection there. We currently anticipate the library will end the fiscal year with around $20 million of cash. Moving on to the next slide, looking at the general fund. The general fund has brought in 63.2 million and had expenditures of about 43.6 million. This is just slightly over budget, again, due to the transfer to the capital that was done earlier this year. That wasn't a part of the original budget plan. That's all I have on that one. Move on to the next slide. On the capital project fund, the total revenue is 6.9 million. The majority of that is the transfer from the general fund, as I mentioned previously. And our expenditures year to date are 442,000. The majority of that is the final expenditures for the capital plan. As you can see, we spent a little bit of that headquarter money in this year. And Before we move on, I did want to throw it over to Aaron because we did actually receive a $569,000 check from the Shoal Creek Tax Increment Financing District. That was for work that we had requested be reimbursed for the Woodneath branch for a trailway project.
Right. So just a quick thank you to Jim Staley and Sarah for the work they did to bring us over the finish line here. When I arrived, I was presented with a piece of paper and said, sign here, we're gonna get $500,000 back. And that is not how it worked out. It took us nearly 2 years of work with Bill Moore, the attorney that was on retainer before Sarah arrived, and then it was transitioned over to Sarah. And lots of back and forth on verifying what the original agreed upon amount was. But I promised my staff a pizza party if this check ever made it to our desk, and finally it made it, so I owe my staff some pizza. But we're happy, and I'm very appreciative of the work you two did to get us to this point. So thank you. And I believe, Diana, excuse me, I don't want to overlook you. You were involved in this too, correct?
It originated through the Woodney Capital, the campaigns to renovate that historic home.
Right. So takes a teamwork to make the dream work. Yes, yeah, thank you.
Right.
Very good. And just one last slide, looking at the internal service fund for health insurance. We have collected $3.3 million, about 69% of the budgeted revenue. Our expenditures are just under 2.6 million, or 49% of our budget. So we're pretty much online with where we thought we would be. And we currently have an operating surplus for the fiscal year of $740,000.
Thank you, Jeremy. The next item is any unfinished business? No. Any new business?
Again,
Jeremy. Go ahead, Jeremy.
this time of year, we're required by the state law to project a non-binding levy. So for those of you who may be new to the board or to the state, the non-binding levy is a attempt to help the taxpayer understand what their tax obligation might be based on where they project assessed valuation to be. Of course, assessed valuation is in the very early stages of the process. All of the taxpayers right now are determining, whether or not they agree with that valuation, determining, what remedy they may want to go through. And so we won't get our actual assessed valuation as certified by the 3 counties until later this year as we're going through the budget process. But the state law requires this as a process. And so since this is a reassessment year, and we have been informed by Jackson County that they believe that their portion of our assessed valuation is going to go up roughly 5%. We don't get that same projection from the other 2 counties. That's only a charter county requirement. And as state law often is, it's only a charter county for charters that were before the law went into effect. So Clay County is now a charter, but they weren't before, thus they're not required to do this. So just to make things easy, we're just going to project that our assessed valuation will go up 5%. Based on that, as we mentioned earlier, the Hancock restricts revenue to 5%, or actual growth, or the consumer price index, whatever is the lowest of those 3 calculations. While the State Tax Commission is not yet certified the consumer price index, it is based on the preceding 12 months. When I looked up that rate, it was 2.9%. So if we project our revenue growth to be 2.9%, it would grow to about 70.23 million. When you divide that by the new assessed valuation figure, the levy would be 3089. If I haven't confused everybody.
And what's the current levy?
That's a good question. 3115, I think.
Okay. If I remember, this was just so, because 3 years ago, and historically, they always put it at the statutory levy, which was
Right.
40 cents, and all that it was caused the phone to ring.
Right, 3152 is the current levy. Yes, so.
It's like, I knew it wasn't gonna be
That's why I
40
was-
cents, but that's the
Yeah.
statutory levy.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, what we did last year, because we had no information in a non-reassessment year, was we simply assumed that assessed valuation would grow nominally and kept the levy flat with the statutory limit. This year, however, we are projecting the 5%. Obviously, if that goes up more, then the levy would go up to, or would go down to accommodate that, and vice versa. So the what we're fairly confident of is it won't be lower than 2.9%. The CPI will be the cap.
Any questions for Jeremy and anything? All right,
No, sir.
I'll turn it over to Aaron or the library director.
We need a vote.
Sorry.
We can submit this to the county.
This is procedural alone, correct?
I'll make a motion. So call the vote.
Trustee Burgo,
Yes.
trustee Cook,
Yes.
trustee Gray,
Yes.
trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Young,
Aye.
trustee Lazio,
Yes.
trustee Lemunion,
Yes.
trustee Dolphy,
Aye.
trustee Step. Aye. Trustee Wilson.
Yeah.
Trustee Whitehall.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. I'll be happy to turn it over to Aaron for the library director CEO's report.
All right, I'll keep it brief. Well, before you, you have two of your MCPL monthly report, and I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the issue of that on the back page. There's a picture of your library director getting his getting taken for a number of quarters over a game of mahjong. I made the acquaintance of Marlise and Alberta. They play mahjong every week. And once every 2 weeks, I believe they meet at Coburn, and they were kind enough to bring me into their group. I'm down quite a few quarters. 3 works playing with them, but I'm committed to learning the game of mahjong. Nonetheless, it demonstrates how our libraries are used. Apparently, we do have another mahjong group that plays at MGC. And let's take some time to look through both of these. They're quite wonderful. Next, I want to just acknowledge an employee for 30 years of service. Bethany Miller. She works at the Green Hills branch, and her manager is Becky Richardson, who's also a wonderful person. But Bethany is passionate about helping customers, especially families of children who attend story times and the weekly Wednesday programs, family book group, kids book groups, and other STEAM activities. One of her proudest accomplishments is being part of a team that got the Reading Rocket rolling. She played a key role in launching Baby Storytime at Boardwalk in 2001 and 2002. Was instrumental in branding story times under MCPL. Over the years, she's also created numerous Storytime PowerPoint presentations to enhance the experience. And when I first arrived, I was new to the job, and Scott Fricker, the commissioner of Platte County, was also new to the job. And I invited him to the Green Hills branch for a meeting just to get to know him. And as luck would have it, it was a Storytime day. And it was probably one of the greatest days to have a commissioner at a branch, because as he's walking in, there's all of these families and children going into the Storytime room. And I needed to do nothing but point outside and say, this is what libraries are about. So Bethany and Becky, they do a great job, as do all of our branches. And I'm very grateful for their service. So thank you, Bethany. Lastly, I'm not going to read the letter in its entirety, but in your board communications, there's a letter from a library patron just expressing her gratitude for the work that we do. She was in journalism and then transferred to being a stay-at-home mom, and she raised 2 children. And there's one paragraph that I thought was particularly impactful that I'd like to read to you. My children are now 9 and 7. We still visit the library often and keep a shelf full of library books. And we regularly switch out in our home. When we get home from school, we snuggle on the couch and read books. Our favorite thing right now is to read chapter books that have been turned into movies. We read the books and then we watch the movies. And those books come from the library. It's giving my children a magical childhood. They've learned about so many different cultures and ways of life and different ways of thinking and being, all because of the library. I'm raising kind, empathetic, intelligent, emotionally intelligent, creative, and wonderful little humans because of the library. So this patron asks of us that we continue our work. And in the end, she says, I'll do whatever I can to keep the library around. Please do the same. So it's nice to receive letters like that. And if you want to read the full letter, it's attached to board docs. But I want to thank everybody for their patience. It's been a long meeting and it's getting quite hot in here. We're not mistaken. But that concludes my report.
Great. Is there any other, thank you, Aaron. Is there any other announcements?
Yeah, so we have a few things coming up. April 1st, there's Library Giving Day. April 6th through 12th is National Library Week. And then on the 20th, all of our locations are closed for Easter. And looking ahead, the PLA conference will be held in,
Philadelphia.
is that PLA or ALA? It's ALA.
It's ALA.
The ALA conference will be held in Philadelphia, June 26th through July 1st.
And if you'd like to go to that,
Good.
And that concludes my part of it.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Is there any trustees' comments? I have just a brief one. Go ahead. You're
My
first.
comment is, this is the first meeting I haven't been freezing, so.
Oh.
I'm quite comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
That's right, yeah.
I just have one comment on the back of this bulletin here. I went to Library Advocacy Day for the first time. Had never been down, I've been to Jeff City many times, but I'd never been to this. I was quite taken back just by meeting with legislators and being in the Capitol, and several of us went, and it was really an eye-opening day. So there's a picture of all of us who went on the right here in the steps, and so I plan on going back to that again. And anyway, it was a great day, great time getting to know everyone. So I really appreciate everybody doing that. Any other trustees' comments? No, if there isn't any, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Bye.
Hi.
Aye.